and that's that low expectation, or that assumed expectation of our young people. But realistically is you can do whatever you want as long as you have the right supports around you. And I think that's where we play a really big role today is just backing our young people and saying, yeah, if you want to do this 100%, you can do it. We're joining you from beautiful Wadawurrung country. I'd like to start by acknowledging the lands that we're meeting you today on, and also acknowledging the lands that you're listening, watching, tuning in from. I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the country that you're standing on, that I'm standing on, and also just acknowledge all First Nations people around the country and, acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. My name's Cormach Evans. I'm a proud Yorta Yorta man and joining you here from our headquarters at Strong Brother, Strong Sister. Realistically for us, we thought it'd be a great idea to be able to share our stories, have discussions around what's going on in the world, specifically around First Nations issues, policies, country, culture, events, leaders, guests, and everything else in between. And really great opportunity to be able to just deep dive into a range of different topics, have some incredible guests on, but also just sharing stories from the day-to-day work that we do to give you guys insight into our lives, into our world, and the work that we do here at Strong Brother, Strong Sister. So come along on this beautiful journey with us, and we hope to be able to share many incredible stories and insights into the work that we do in our world, but also just to really open up the doors to everyone into our world. So welcome. We thought we'd jump into our first episode with literally just having a fireside yarn. So I'm honoured to be joined by a beautiful friend of mine, colleague, family member in my eyes, someone that I've grown up with and shared many journeys along life throughout my whole life, but also my children's life as well. Keeden Graham is a Yorta Yorta, Jar Jar Wurrong and Wiradjuri man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think, obviously it's been, great to watch the journey of Strong Brother, Strong Sister, and it's been obviously a pleasure to, be a part of this journey. And I thought, I guess where we could start with, was how Strong Brother was concepted and where the ideas came from and, how long it's been going for. And I thought I'd start with asking yourself some questions just about how, this started and the idea behind it and how it maybe has changed over time. So maybe we'll just bring it back to how the idea initially started and, where you were at when this was being thought of.
Yeah, no, good question, Buzz. Yeah, exciting. I think I haven't reflected, I guess, for quite some time, so it's always good to jump back in. But many years ago, I think Strong Brother, Strong Sister now is 8 years old, which is really cool. And we've been going for 8 years now. And it has had some big changes over those 8 years. But also, I think the amazing part about it is, there's those non-negotiables that will always be there as well. So the values, and our purpose, which we can talk about a little bit later. But I guess, for me, it was around, I was really lucky. I worked in a community organisation, an Aboriginal community controlled org for a couple of years and started off as an Aboriginal health worker, went to VATCHO and did my training and all that, which was really amazing, and so privileged to be able to do that and met some amazing people along that journey. But really, I guess over that period of time, just saw a lot of injustice. Injustice is, I guess, I don't know if that's a word, but realistically, just saw a lot of stuff that just wasn't right. I was working with mainly First Nations men, from anywhere as young as children, all the way up to elders. But I guess over that period of time, probably over a 12-month period, realistically, I guess there was around 6 Aboriginal men that I worked with that were still under the age of sort of 50 or 60 years old, depending on their journey, and just, yeah, had a lot of preventable diseases. So we're looking at lung cancer, bowel cancer, diabetes, mental health, and a range of other things that really led to them leaving us way too early. And so I had such a privilege to work alongside those fellas, and yeah, I guess in preparing them to, I guess, leave this earth and enter the dream time, so to speak, and broke a lot of rules and got in a lot of trouble, which was mad. And I think that's how I roll. Yeah, it was. I was able to support them to be able to tick off their bucket list, so to speak. So I didn't care about getting in trouble. I thought it was so important to ensure that they had quality of life for that. Whether it was that 6 months period or 12-month period.
Were there more challenges that specifically applied to the men that you kind of noticed? Were there anything specific that, you saw that the older men were facing, and whether, that's the disconnection or anything in particular?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, and I think it's really why we wanted to start this podcast too. Was one of those underlining issues around that deep sense of shame
Mm.
around seeking help as First Nations men. And for me, it's such a nowadays it's such a really important thing. I think as men, we somehow believe that when we've taught our own selves, or we've learnt it from other people along the way, that we have to be strong and we have to suck it up and we have to continue on. And I think that was one of the biggest thing with a lot of those fellas that I saw at the start
Yeah.
in building that relationship was just that sense of I'm fine, and deep down, you could see that they weren't okay, and like mentally, physically, spiritually, everything realistically, because of that journey of where they were. Yeah, I think it was just that sense of shame and that stigma around not seeking help and
Yeah.
trying to be the man, which is really sad. But I think the beauty of that journey also allowed me to create that trust and
Yeah.
rapport and allow them to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability was such an important piece of that journey for those men, to be able to have drop their guard and and focus on special things that they always wanted to do. I know, yeah, there was a few things that I supported them to do. One time we ended up driving up to the Murray River in a day, and work didn't know,
Yeah.
which is mad. And that was part of
Mm.
what they wanted to do. They wanted to go home to country just to say goodbye, and they had some family members, buried up on country, and they wanted to make sure that they could do what they needed to do. And and just and I think that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't have been able to build that relationship and that trust. And if I would have hate to think what would have happened if we didn't have that relationship, and build that trust. Would that person have asked me to take them up to their country
Yeah.
and do that part of their journey? And would they have regretted that, if they didn't do that? So yeah, I think it's just the stigma around health and well-being for men.
Yeah.
It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to cry. All those sorts of things. I think it's such an important piece that we need
Yeah.
to probably talk about more and encourage. Whether it's young people, older people, men, women,
Yeah.
non-binary, mob, everyone. We all need to be able to heal and feel things.
And so from those experiences, I guess, working with men, you saw a need in the system or a gap in the system. And so then that kind of led you down the path of, the idea of Strong Brother. Is that, where that came from?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
So I guess after I guess that journey of that period of time where I supported those men, yeah, with palliative care and sort of preparing for their next journey. It ruined me, like I guess in a sense, and I needed some time to heal myself because it's such a big thing to carry, I guess, in many ways. And to be honest, like I think at the time, I guess big organisations don't know how to support all their staff because they've got so many staff or whatever. So I end up sort of getting approached by another team within the organisation, and that was around supporting kids in out of home care, and that sort of yeah, it resonated really well. I think based on my own experience as a young person in terms of just certain experiences and journeys and everything else, but then also realistically for me it was around seeing those men, and they were passing away at such an early age, but it was all preventable.
Yeah.
And so I knew, unfortunately, I couldn't keep doing that work with those men. Just wasn't sustainable and everything else for my mental health. And so thought, right, let's jump in early. Let's look at early intervention and prevention sort of work. And that was amazing. It was such a amazing journey. I learned so much from that team, but again, I guess there was a really big gap, and it was just that. I guess it was that piece around just that disruption. That disruption of a sector, or the disruption of a colonial system that had been enforced, but could be disrupted, but no one was disrupting it down here where we lived.
And
at
you
that point
say
in time.
disrupting in the sense that it was set up to work in a way that wasn't in the best interest of young people. Is that what you mean by
Yeah,
disrupt it? So
100%.
disrupt it in a way that, I guess puts pressure on the current service delivery in a way that is more holistic. Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, sort of. I think there's probably a few different ways to look at it as well. You look at the stolen generation, and that's still happening today. And we all know it is. As blackfellas, we see it firsthand here at Strong Brother. You see it firsthand in your work too, So there's that element of, our kids and our families are targeted by child protection, and it's based on bias, and it's based on discrimination, it's based on racism, and we know that because we see that firsthand. Both you and me see that, and our communities see that, and our families see that. And so seeing that element, I guess, in a sense, but then also seeing, that there's different ways to do things. We can be flexible, we can shift and adapt, and one size doesn't fit all. I think that was the biggest thing for me. And so with those young people that I was working with at that time, it was just this one model for all of those different kids, but all those kids had completely different journeys and experiences, but then also trauma, and some had already lived in like 20 different homes before they were 12 years old, and that's something I can never relate to, as a human being, because I've never experienced that. But so how can something just work for everyone? It doesn't, so I think that was the biggest piece for me that didn't sit well. And I was my partner Coco was pregnant with our first son Wari at the time, and I think about 3 months pregnant, and it was at the point where I was sort of not bitter, but I was sort of over that place, just because I was trying to do things that would change the lives of those people, because I cared for those people, because I grew up with their families in community, but also they're human beings, and they deserve better, and that's there.
I guess it's hard working in a big organization because there's a bureaucracy set up already, so it can be hard to make certain changes. And if you can't implement those changes, or I guess it's the only way to do it is to kind of take it into your own hands and
100%
go from there.
100%. And so I went to my team leader and said, "Hey, I got this idea," and she was like, "That's amazing." And she's always been so supportive, and we're still in contact today, and always backs the work that we do, And she was the first person to send our first clients as well, at Strong Brother. And I hate the word clients, but she sent the first young people that we worked with. But so I went to her, and she was like, "Look, Bruss, that sounds amazing, and I can't approve this, unfortunately. There's systems in place, so you need to talk to this person." And so I ended up with the CEO, and they were even like, "It's amazing, but we can't," and fair enough, obviously, they have a role to play, and there's governance and everything else within that org. But, I think it's a good lesson to be able to reflect and always look back at our values and why we started, for example, why we started Strong Brother. And so they said, "No, we can't." And so I quit on the spot. It just didn't sit well with me, and I couldn't see myself working in a position where there wasn't that flexibility, when I knew we could actually make real change rather than constantly putting a Band-Aid on a situation, so to speak. I knew we could actually really address that, so if we're looking at a wound, we could actually nurture that wound. We could, nurture it, apply, the right care to it, and ensure that that wound is fully healed. There might be a scar there, so to speak,
Yeah.
and that scar will always be there. But to be able to actually move forward and learn from that scar in a sense, and make sure that that scar had fully healed in a
Yeah.
sense. So yeah, so I quit. I was driving home and going, "Oh, what have I done?" And there was some, definitely some swear words going on the way home. I was like,
Yeah.
driving home by myself.
You were quite nervous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And thankfully, and as she always has been, Cokes was so supportive. And that night we did a big whiteboard session, and planned it out. It was all stuff we knew,
Yeah.
but also we wanted to make sure that we constantly learn along the way, and we're not just going to have this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. I think that was the biggest learning curve. And being true to myself, but also applying lots of learnings from the organizations that I've worked for, or the businesses that I worked for, good and bad, taking those learnings of the bad learnings and the bad experiences of being an employee somewhere, especially a blackfella employee as well.
Yeah.
But then also the good ones as well. So, making sure that we had this workplace that was really supportive, a family, sense of a family, but also was the best of the best, and we expect the best of the best on ourselves, but also we expect the best from our community, for our community as well, which I think was really important. So, yeah, I guess we came up with the idea of personally tailored supports. So each individual gets a personally tailored program based on their needs, their experiences, their cultural experience and journey, whether it's their traumas they've experienced, but also focusing on the positives, focusing on their hobbies, their passions, their strengths, what brings them joy, and also what their own values are as well. So that was a really important piece. And yeah, it sort of just grew from there realistically. And we've made changes along the way and added things in to support that core piece of that one-on-one, personally tailored, holistic, sort of culturally informed, trauma-informed approach.
Yeah. So it started initially with the one-on-one supports, one-on-one tailored mentoring. And then I guess another key element that is one of the core foundational is the crew youth group.
Yeah.
So when did that come into play, and how early on was that as a factor in our programs?
Yeah. I think it was in between sort of 4 to 6 months, I think, when it came into place. We got approached by the city of Greater Geelong. They had a Koori youth budget that they had. I think it was 20 grand at the time. So, it wasn't, and that was for 12 months.
Wow.
So they approached us, and so we started, and it was amazing. The first one we ran, I think we had like 30 or so young people from all over the community come and attend. And there was this beautiful yarning session. Realistically, we just we had Wadawurrung traditional owners there do a smoking and a welcome to country, and just really set the scene. Karina's always worked really closely with us, but also just does so much for our community. And I think she really saw the need for the youth organisation and youth supports in the community. And so to have that backing was really important for us, but also just to see what we were able to create by just having the right people in the space, and just the yarns that flowed on from there. We had a range of different people from all walks of different community within the First Nations community. We had queer mob, we had trans mob, we had men, women, elders there, young people, children, the younger brothers and sisters. And there was we created this big circle where we had yarns, and we had 3 of those yarns: yellow, black and red. And then we just went around the room, and we just started off with like, what's your name? Tell us a bit about yourself. What's your passions and hobbies, and what do you hope to see for the future for young people? Yeah. And it just went from there. It was really cool. And realistically from there, we saw the importance of co-design, and so to speak. And I hate the word co-design, but it was about centering our young ones as the boss.
Yeah.
our young ones they're the boss and they determine what happens. They determine what the needs are, and that was that sort of epiphany moment of, I was still a young person at the time, but one voice can't represent all voices of young people in the community. So that was really amazing. And from there, we made sure that those youth groups are in ongoing support,
Yeah.
which is the key piece, I think, which probably not many other organisations do,
Yeah.
realistically, I'd say.
Yeah, and I guess also those career youth groups not only being that ongoing support, but for the one-on-one mentoring, you we probably get a lot of referrals that when things are towards kind of the pointy end or the more at risk
Yeah,
end of the spectrum, whereas the career youth groups in our group programs, I guess, provide a safe space for, I guess, really early prevention and intervention, and young people growing up in community and just wanting
100%.
to be a part of their local community. So it really hopefully addresses those really early things before we get one-on-one referrals for some of the more at-risk stuff we see. So
Yeah,
but
100%.
yeah, I think that ongoing support has seemed to be pretty, I guess, foundational to the work that we do and the outcomes and that young people achieve in terms of what they would like to see for themselves as well.
Yeah,
And so I guess we've spoken a little bit about how you got, I guess, the idea for Strong Brother, where the motivation behind it came from, the core foundational programs. And so I think, what year was this? Roughly
I think it was,
2018,
I think it was 2017. Yeah, May 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in terms of whether it's funding or officers, like how was your approach in that? Obviously 20K for a 12-month youth group
Yeah.
isn't a lot of, I guess, a lot to work with, but how did you try your best to find supports and avenues to
Yeah.
continue this and continue to grow it as well?
100%. Yeah. So it was such a, the business world or non-for-profit world for us was such a new space. I dropped out of school in, I think, year 10 or into year 10. And so I had no idea. And luckily have an amazing partner, Cokes, who sort of, has that knowledge and everything else. And so was able to have amazing people around me who were experts in different fields. And so how we set it up was to ensure, if we said at the start, if we were going to do work with young people and children,
Yeah.
you can't do it half-assed, realistically. You need to put everything in. So you need to make sure it was sustainable.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start something, it needs to always be there. Doesn't matter if it's me or you or anyone, we need to make sure that there's a legacy piece, and that will always be there in terms of this place and this hub, but also the programs and the supports. And over years, it'll change and look differently. And but the fact that our young people will always have Strong Brother, Strong Sister, or SBSS, or whatever it is in the future. It doesn't matter. It's just about making sure that it'll always be there. And so when we first started off, there was a lot of fee for service. So we were working with child protection and youth justice, and we were charging them for our services, and which was a fun dance. And it really taught me about advocacy piece, the advocacy piece around our young ones, and ensuring that they had cultural supports as part of their, whether it was their targeted care packages, whether it was they were in kinship care or permanent care or residential care, they're entitled to a range of different things. And so I guess that, we know CP are quite tight and always trying to push back, and trying to save dollars here and there and everywhere and cut corners. And we know that's a thing, and it's always been represented in whether it's a Royal Commission or inquiries or whatever it is. We know that's a thing. And so I guess I learned how to advocate through that area, but we were charging fee for service. And it was just myself at the time, and we were working out of my house. And then utilising space. And the great thing about being blackfellas is we, a lot of our healing comes from time out on country, or, and learning out on country. So a lot of the time we were utilising and just being really smart in what we did. So we'd go out bush, would do surfing, go down the beach, or would utilise different spaces within the community, whether it was the cultural centre or or different areas, would go up to Bunjalaka quite often as well. But yeah, just being really smart. Then we're given a space for a period of time, which is really amazing. But then understanding, there's different politics within different organisations and everything else as well, and why I guess certain people were committing to supporting us. Was it in their interest or was it in our best interest in the work that we we're doing? So from there, it was really, we were able to then look at getting grants.
Yeah.
And through those grants, then we were able to sort of really set up some great structures and grow from there. And we had a small office and we set that up. And then obviously we're here now in this amazing big warehouse that we've turned into a youth hub, And so I think it's always just been about, not going half-assed, so to speak, but also if we're going to do something, we need to do it properly.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that it's done in the best interest of our young people and their voices are at the forefront in every decision. So still learning as we go as well, but the great thing is now I've got through those experiences, we created an organisation called Naramili to support blackfellas in starting businesses based off my experience of not knowing, learning, seeing racism, discrimination and bias and everything else as well in the business world, and just trying to knock down doors. So I think, through that, I was able to learn a lot, and I'm still learning, I think. But I think it's just that, we expect the best and we don't accept anything else, in many ways. So,
and I guess there's those challenges around being a black business owner, especially grassroots and starting something from scratch. Is it's not just about, I guess, starting the business. It's about, like you talked about, all the bias and prejudice, and in our case, the advocacy as well, to advocate to government why these programs are important, why they should be investing. And so obviously
100%.
all these things, take a toll on you emotionally and spiritually. And then you've also still got to do that, I guess, business piece where you've got to, cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and I guess, make sure that every bit of paperwork is right to access those grants or, do those reports. And is that still a challenge, and has that been, I guess, an ongoing challenge, and also maybe, I guess, part of your journey to want to have, I guess, self-empowerment as an organization where we don't have to rely as heavily on those bureaucratic systems that are in place?
100%, Bruce. And I've learned a lot from you, and I've learned a lot from, Rubes and everyone, along the way, and I think we're always learning. I think the moment that I stop learning is the moment I stop, because it means you're not in it for the right reasons anymore, and you think you know everything, which is not the case. I think, but I think there's we still see it today. Like even you look at I've been so privileged and fortunate to be living on Larrakia country for the last 4 years. And then we've just had this election up there, and now we've got the CLP, which is the Country Liberal Party up there, who are extremely right-winged, extremely racist, extremely discriminative. And they say they're not.
Yeah.
But the evidence is clear as day that they are.
In their policies.
In all their policies, but also they're just plain stupid.
Yeah.
I think as soon as they came in, they lowered the age of criminal responsibility back to 10. 10-year-olds shouldn't be in prisons. They should be with family, out on country, and have nurture, have love and care, but also their decision-making process, that part of their neurosystem, in their brain hasn't developed yet.
Well,
so they don't actually know.
It's interesting, I guess, at this point in time when we've just passed a policy that kids can't be on social media until they're 16 because of the dangers of social media.
Yeah.
But apparently 10 is old enough to be locked up and, your rights taken away from you.
Exactly. And we've seen the destruction already of what early, being introduced into a prison does to our children, or to all children, and then the ripple effects that has. So, I think there's, lots of learnings, and there always will be learnings. But I think for me, the biggest piece is around that, just that advocacy piece and expecting the best for our mob and everything else. And that's I think the NT is such a good example of seeing the twistedness of it. They approached us to give us funding, and we told them no way, we're not going to work with a government. And that's the, I guess the reality of what we see is everyone thinks that being a non-for-profit and an Aboriginal organisation, you get heaps of funding and it's all this magic and it's amazing, and it's not the case. For us, our values sit really strong, and when they approached us for funding, we're like, no way, we're not gonna.
Yeah.
But then flip it, and we've got funders, philanthropic funders up in the NT that are encouraging us to, and constantly pressuring us to get funding from the government because they want to wean us off, because of their own sort of ideas and their own philosophies of what they think's best for us as a First Nation dog, even though they're not First Nations people and they can't relate. So, there's that dance of, trying to maintain a relationship with the funder from a philanthropic side, whilst they're also trying to pressure you into accepting money from a government that is trying to assimilate your people, plain and simple. And so there's the complexities of running an org, but that stuff I think gives me drive and keeps me going. That's the stuff I really love, and Coke's always sort of says that's when I get my spark, when there's a situation there's injustice and equality in a situation, that's when I love to jump hard and jump in and fight for our kids and our young people and all our people in a sense. So and I think that's where we learn the best, in those pressure moments, and it's okay to fail in those pressure moments. And I think that's been the biggest success, is being able to go, hey, like, we didn't fail, but that situation didn't work.
Yeah.
How do we learn from that? And or that wasn't right. And how do we make it right, in a sense, and it might be a situation that shows, where the government has lowered the age of criminal responsibility to put children or babies into a jail. We know that's not right.
Yeah.
And so how do we address it, and how do we work towards it? Yeah. And we know we can't do certain things, but how do we be strategic and dismantle a system from the ground up, sort of thing. So I think there's lots of learnings for me, but our staff. But I think I think this is why we did the podcast, as an opportunity to give people deep insight into our day-to-day, but also to be able to showcase excellence, Black excellence. I think it's amazing. And there's people behind the scenes that we never know about because they don't want to be at the forefront of something or a leader or whatever it is. They just want the best for the community, and how do we support them, And I think that's where this podcast comes in the place of a place for opportunity to showcase those people, in a sense. And for a viewer that might have the utmost privilege and have a trust fund or a philanthropic organisation or whatever, or not, or could donate $5, but that $5 might go a long way.
Or could be, a powerful ally that
100%,
I guess listens to First Nations community and advocates, alongside and in a respectful way.
Totally.
Well, yeah, I guess we've spoken about, the core foundational programs that started Strong Brother.
Yeah.
The one-on-one mentoring and the ongoing career youth groups. I guess now looking at where we're at today in terms of, the other programs that have been, a part of Strong Brother's journey, and going forward, how those play a part in the overall holistic nature of our programs as well.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's a really good question to ask. And lots changed over the last 8 years, as you can imagine. And, I think the most proudest piece of it for me is it's all been led by yourself and Rubes and our staff as young people, but also the young people that we work with. And so, we're today's Wednesday. Every Wednesday now we have a sailing program in partnership with the Geelong Sailing Club. This incredible old fella called Bill, who just approached us one day out of the blue, and they cover the cost of everything. Like our kids are on this multi-million-dollar yacht every Wednesday sailing, and some of our kids had never even, been able to swim or, had fear of swimming in the ocean because, they've never been taught to swim, but now they're steering the ship and they're winning competitions. It's like a mini Sydney to Hobart race, so to speak. So, I think that's one of the great programs that we now run every Wednesday, like during the sailing season. And that's hectic. I'm sure, you've been on that boat. I haven't been on the boat. I'm going to go there this afternoon with you, which is really exciting. But, I'm sure you can talk about, how hectic it is on that boat when there's a bit more wind rather than a calm day.
And I think just the working together on the boat too, because obviously sailing requires a level of teamwork. So you've got, someone steering, someone, I guess, calling out what's happening, pulling the different ropes for the different masks. And then when you, change direction, so you're right, it can get, quite chaotic and the boat can be, turning sideways at times. So I think it puts, young people outside of their comfort zone, but then also, reinforces that teamwork and that community and looking after each other kind of vibe. But like you said, also the experience of something that they may have never had or maybe never would have if it wasn't for Strong Brother and, community members that have the best interest of, our kids at heart too.
100%, Buzz. And you look at now, so we've got, we'll just list them. But we've got our personally tailored one-on-one support, which is classified as our mentoring. But and when we say mentoring, I think mentoring really undervalues the work of our staff. I think and mentoring is amazing, but I think when we look at the work that yourself and our team do in that holistic and one-on-one personally tailored support, it's not just mentoring. It's really, it's a counselling role. It's a therapeutic role. It's a life skills role. It's a guidance role. It's so many different roles depending on the young person and where they're at in their journey, but it requires great skill. It requires empathy, compassion, kindness, all those important traits, but there's also that high level of qualification that is needed, whether it's a diploma in counselling like yourself, or whether it's, a diploma in youth work or youth services, psychology, whatever it is. I think, people get mistaken when we talk about that mentoring element and sort of see it as just hanging out with kids. It is that, but it's far more than that. It's really really deep diving into supporting a young person to get to where they need to go and backing them, but also really going through different parts of their upbringing, their trauma, their experiences to provide that safety. And, we've got our youth groups, our school holiday programs where we run school holiday programs where we'll utilise some of our partners. We'll go to urban surf, we'll go to adventure park, we'll go out bush. We do lots of different activities. And again, it's those activities within our school holidays and our youth groups and that are to create opportunities for our kids to test and try things that, like you said, that they might never have had the opportunity to give a go, but also creates positive peer groups. It creates, those opportunities to learn and to work together and to support each other, and all those important things that I guess sometimes we take for granted as human beings that haven't experienced different circumstances that other people have, so to speak. But then also, we've had things pop up over time where that has created programs based off whether it's an event in community that might have a negative effect within the community, or just from a learning experience as well, we might create programs. So now we have a suicide prevention program that's embedded within our organisation, and it's all around ensuring our young people have immediate access to mental health professionals or suicide prevention and intervention support. So there's no waiting times, there's no costs associated. It's just immediate access, and we do the work in the background to get, the doctor's appointment. That does take time. The GP mental health care plan, that does take time. And so without the suicide prevention program, realistically, young people and families are waiting anywhere between 4 weeks to 6 months to get in to see a mental health professional to get support for suicide intervention and prevention supports, when realistically, when you look at that as like suicide, it needs to be addressed straight away. And so that was a really big learning factor for us. And we lost a young one in our community a few years ago now. And it was around really identifying what the barriers were around that support and why, but also what the gaps were. And so we really worked closely with the community and the families to create that program based off the stresses, the barriers and everything else as well. And just to fast track something that should be so simple.
Yeah, I guess with that program, it was a program that it seemed simple, like the solution, and it obviously had some of the biggest barriers, but also some of the most detrimental effects, should those negative outcomes happen.
100%.
I guess, would you like to talk about, some of the results or some of the outcomes or, some of the findings or learnings that these programs have had? So, including all of them, but especially the suicide prevention one as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably only this point in time that we've been able to reflect. And I think it's a really beautiful space to be in now. Is we've done a lot of work at that pointy end of the stick for the last 7 years, so to speak, and now we're really seeing the results of that, where we're not constantly reactive. It's not reactive supports to a crisis, because we've done that work. We've embedded, resources, life skills, and all these pillars, I guess, that allow early intervention and prevention work now, which is a really great place to be. And I think that's the best example of an outcome is we're now not reactive to a crisis. We're already ahead of that crisis and preventing that crisis. And you see in the work that we're doing with our little Rangers program, where we're working with kids from 4 to 10 years old. And it's not anything except this amazing group where these young ones come and access our programs. But realistically, it's early intervention and it's prevention work, but it's very simple. And so, we look at, even the other day, we did have a young person in crisis and, there was suicide intervention. And we were able to, immediately address that, provide wraparound supports to that young person. But more importantly, to be able to have the capacity and the space to take that young person out into a safe place and spend the day out bush doing something that they really enjoy. And the result of that is massive. We created space, we created safety, but we utilised and embedded cultural aspects into that situation, which created this really beautiful environment, atmosphere where this young person felt safe to talk about those stresses that led to them being suicidal. So I think, but also, and in the long run, we're seeing now some of the young people that have come through our programs now working for us, but also now working at some of, at Murrin, which is a result of Strong Brother, Strong Sister starting, and creating Narramilli, which Narramilli then created Murrin. We're seeing these young people working in the cafe at Murrin or in the retail store and getting life skills, which is really amazing to even just young people knowing that they are in control of their futures. And we look at, for an example of young people in out-of-home care, knowing based on the work that we've done with them or seeing what we've done with their siblings, having the confidence, the backing and the knowledge to be able to say what's right for them and advocate for themselves, when they haven't been able to, whether it's with their child protection workers where they don't usually feel safe, but they're saying, no, this is my future and I'm in control of my future, not you. And this is what I want. And I think that's the most powerful thing that we're seeing now, I think.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of that shift from, like you said, working in the pointy end where most of the situations were more at risk or, high end crisis periods where it's, I guess, creating, organizations, whether it's Strong Brother, Narramilli, Murrin as a result of Narramilli, that I guess young people, they're growing up in an environment that is, much more supported and safe. And they're seeing different opportunities in front of them that maybe 7, 8 years ago weren't there. So then that's creating that, early intervention, but also aspirational part of their futures as well.
Totally.
And so, I think, that's a big change that's kind of happened. And I think that's something, like you said, that is kind of foundational in terms of where we want to go as, organizations, especially Aboriginal grassroots organizations, are moving away from those situations and providing aspirational opportunities and experiences that these young people, I guess gives them the best chance of living their best life and achieving what they want. So
yeah,
I think
100%.
it's, a credit to, yourself but also all the staff from all the orgs and that we're associated with, I guess, working towards that like one vision and kind of having that holistic community feel, even as we've grown and, changed and adapted as well.
Totally. And I think that's the beauty of it, is those moments of, you can't be what you can't see. And, for a long time, for First Nations communities across the country, especially young people, we're always told, and I'm no longer a young person, but we were always told, and our young people still are always told, it's footy or sports or a trade, and that's all you'll ever do, and that's that low expectation, or that assumed expectation of our young people. But realistically is you can do whatever you want as long as you have the right supports around you. And I think that's where we play a really big role today is just backing our young people and saying, if you want to do this 100%, you can do it.
Yeah.
Let's look at it. Let's plan it. Let's make sure it's going to be successful.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, get to that outcome, it's okay. And we can learn from it and go again, and I think that's the beauty of it. Is we're seeing, we're even seeing young people starting their own businesses and making a profit, because we're backing them. And it's, we're not saying, no, you can't do that. Yeah. It's like, no, we want you to set a bar way beyond, what other people have expected of us. Yeah. And I think that's where the true power comes from, is we've always been told, no, you can't do that. You're not good enough for that. Or, it's too hard. Yeah. It's like, no. You can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it might be hard, but you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Especially, you got that support system and community around you. I guess that's kind of a good overall, wrap around approach of our different programs, or Strong Brothers programs and the communities programs. And I guess it sounds like they're, created from a need as well. So it's not just, whether it's you saying, hey, we should do this program and that program, but it is community looking at the needs of community and saying, oh, okay, now there's a real need for this, or this doesn't exist. I think this would be really beneficial, and seeing what community think and seeing what they dictate as well. So it sounds like not only, do these programs exist, but they're adaptable and they're movable depending on where community needs move and where they move to. So I think that's also another beautiful thing about the different programs that 100%. We offer.
100%. Yeah, I think, And the moment we stop doing that again is the moment we should stop. Yeah. And realistically, they all lead to the same things, in terms of outcomes. Realistically, holistically, the outcomes lead to the same things. We're creating opportunities for our kids to connect to their own identity, their true identity, and not something that's forced upon them by someone else. It's creating space for them to determine what their identity looks like and who they are, and go on that learning experience. It creates an opportunity for them to actually gain a sense of belonging, whether it's here at Strong Brother and with their peer groups, from their youth groups and everything else, or from connection to country and culture comes that other sense of belonging, of knowing your true identity, because we know some of our kids have been removed and everything else. And so, I think for what comes from everything we do is we're creating that sense of identity, that sense of belonging, and those really important connections that lead to those two things, but also that lead to, prosperous, healthy lives, which is culture, community, and country.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're the most important things for our kids. And, you know, you look at I drove from Larrakia country to Waterong country and saw so many different countries, and just the beauty of observing country was really special, you know, and it really reinforced how important, you know, those you know, identity, belonging, country, community, and culture is in many ways. So I think, you know, that's where we're leading our kids to, and then from there comes endless opportunities for our kids at the same time. Kids, Bruss, you know, I think, you know, you've grilled me, well, not grilled me, but asked me a heap of questions. But, you know, for me, as I don't know, the CEO or managing director or whatever, I think my role is always to flip the narrative in a sense, or I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, but, you know, Russ, you've been with us for most of that time since we started, and, you know, I've known you for a long time before then. You're our senior Aboriginal youth support officer, counsellor. You wear a lot of different hats. You know, I think I'd love to get your insight on, you know, your work, but also like learnings and celebrations that you might like to reflect on since you've started. So maybe, you know, what's like the biggest reflection you have since you've started?
Yeah, no, that's a big question. But yeah, thanks for asking. I think that, you know, there's a lot of different learnings, but I think one of the key learnings, or one of the things that's been really foundational in terms of what I try to do each day, is build trust. Like that, I think, is at the centerpiece of everything I try to do. And it's always looking at different ways I can build trust and rapport and, you know, respect, and that mutual respect between, you know, us as staff and young people. But also acknowledging that as Aboriginal people, we're always going to exist in the same community. And so we're always going to be there for each other in, you know, whether it's a professional way or, you know, in a community level. And so seeing how those two things kind of intertwine. And I think that's what makes it really different than mainstream, is the impact that we can have, not only, you know, on a professional level in our programs, in our space, but then, you know, we see a young person community and we say hi, or, you know, say hi to their parents, and, you know, see them at the supermarket or whatever it is. And in that casual, informal setting that I think really kind of differentiates us, you know, as, you know, being community and, you know, family, all one big family in a way. And so I think, you know, in terms of whether it's counselling or the mentoring or, some of the different things that I do in my work, I think that is probably one of the biggest key things, is that, trust, rapport, and community feel as well. And I think that is something that I guess a lot of the mainstream orgs, there's barriers there because, you know, there's high turnover and there's, I guess, not consistency in staff, and the communities is not, I guess, as, you know, formed as Aboriginal communities in each areas.
Yeah.
And so I think the consistency as well, which we operate in terms of having very low staff turnover, having, you know, people at this org since conception, or, you know, since they join, very rarely do staff ever, you know, leave. And I think that speaks to, you know, not only the culture that we have here, but also the impact and the community responsibility that our staff feel towards, you know, young people.
Yep.
And I think, you know, it's, as soon as you build a culture that, I guess, embodies that, it's a really great thing for the young people. But also, you know, I know as staff, we get just as much out of those experiences. And so in terms of learning where, you know, the young people are from, or, you know, different cultural things that they know that maybe we don't know, or, you know, sharing different things as well. So I think it goes two ways in terms of that learning and respect. And that's why those relationships are so, you know, deep, and like, you know, deep to the point where we might not speak to, you know, a young person might disengage, you know, move somewhere like 2 hours away, be going through a hard time, still have our number, call us, hey, I need help, hey, I'm feeling, disconnection to culture. And we don't go, oh, this doesn't, fit inside the box. It's like, no, your community, your family, always always reach out, we'll always be there and support. And I think, just doing everything in that. And I think what we said, we don't like saying a couple of words on this, but I think it's just because they've become buzzwords, like holistic.
Totally.
Those holistic is beautiful, but it becomes a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
But I think doing it in that way ensures that we're just always trusted by young people, and we always have their back. So I think that's probably a little summary of I guess some of what I do, and the way in which I try to approach it as well.
Totally. And I think, I think from what you've just said, the one thing that springs to my mind is reciprocity, which is so rare in a service delivery organization. There's never reciprocity in mainstream organizations in terms of providing a service. And I don't like the word client, but we're going to use this as a word. So from a service to a client, there's never reciprocity.
Yeah.
But in this case, there is, by the sounds of it, in your views, which I think is such a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah.
Because I think from what I see and how you work and how our other staff work with young people, is there's a long-lasting legacy piece and relationship and connection that, like you said, even when I was driving back here to Wadawurrung country from Darwin, there's, like you said, there's people that have left the programs and gone on to do great things, and that's the best case scenario. And so to be able to drop into a town that's on the way home and catch up with a brother boy that came through our programs is the most beautiful thing, because there is that connection still based on that reciprocity that we have created together with the young people that we work with. There's that shared, and I think that's just First Nations culture. It's just that we don't expect, we don't expect to make something from a situation and gain, it's not about gaining anything. It's about sharing and kindness and all those important traits that, the greater society would benefit deeply from if they worked in that way of working. So thank you for sharing.
No, it's okay. Thanks for asking.
And I guess, I think it's always good to ask is like, what do you see for the future? Like, what's something you'd like, you envision for yourself or the work that you do or our young ones?
Yeah, I think in terms of the future, I think, it's always great to, forward plan and, it's great to have, like, I've got goals in terms of whether it's, further study and, whether it's personal in terms of, I guess trying to, improve myself in, each way that I can. But I think I really enjoy the advocacy space. And I think that's something that, I kind of started a little bit in 2020 through, you allow me to have different opportunities that work adjacent to kind of Strong Brother, but allowed me to advocate on behalf of, I guess, some of the young people that I work with here. And I think, doing the on the ground work is great.
Yeah.
But unless we have, I guess, people advocating and a lot of different people advocating, because we're only 3% of the total population, 1% of the Victorian population, our voices can often be lost or they cannot be heard unless we've got, a big number of people that are constantly, talking about the issues and talking about what needs to be done and how we can help. And so I think, doing a little bit more in that advocacy space as well, I think that kind of, I guess, fulfills me enough to, see what I'm seeing on the ground, but then also provide what I'm seeing and, hopefully trying to impact people that make decisions on what they can maybe do to support what I'm seeing. But in terms of, I don't know, one of my biggest goals each day is to be constantly in the pursuit of like bettering myself. So that's in whatever that looks like. But I think And I think that's how, people achieve great things.
Yep.
Is each day they just want to get better. It's like, how do I get better? Okay, I've got to have a growth mindset. So I've got to be open to new opportunities and new experiences, and whether it's, study or listening to someone. I think if, we can all do that, and I think anyone that's achieved has that kind of a mindset. I think it's about, being open to those opportunities when they arise, and then taking advantage of those opportunities as well.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, Bruce. 100%. And I think, seeing that advocacy piece, that you have done, I think, it was in the depths of, 2020.
Yeah.
And, for a good couple of years, I think it was the Victorian Youth Congress, and a few other things, and to see, that collaboration with other young people from all different walks of life, different community groups, and different parts of the state was really amazing to see, because you're right, there's, we are a small percentage of the population, and, and realistically we need to work together to be able to support each other for sustainability, for our own, well-being and everything, because we can't have, I guess and we've been so fortunate here, you and I, in a sense, because we have benefited from the sacrifices that many of our, our elders and whoever else that have sort of are still here today or come before us and have left now, that have done the work to allow us to be here. But today, I think, and it's a big thing for me, is like, the weight can't sit on the one person's shoulders. How do we support, and how do we make it not a weight? How do we, relinquish that weight, so to speak, and how do we support each other to just do what we need to do? Like you said, to be able to, like you said, being on the ground's great, 100%. But you nailed it, is, we need those people in those spaces to hold people to account. To disrupt the systems that have been designed to, assimilate us realistically. And there are still systems in place, today that are designed to do that. They look prettier. That's all they are. They just got a good, exterior. But deep down there, entrenched with colonialism and, and everything else. So I think, that's such an important piece. And it's been an absolute, to honor to watch that, in many ways, and to see that, that way, that your critical thinking in those situations is, and it's a no-brainer to let you do those things. And for those who don't know, we work with our staff to create those PDs and to create those opportunities with, because there's growth, like you said, there's those growth opportunities, but then there's further opportunities, not only for yourself or Strong Brother. There's opportunities for our young ones in our communities. So it's reciprocity, but it's also those ripple effects that are created from, allowing people to do what they need to do within our organisation. Because otherwise, like you said, there's not a high turnover of staff. And I think that's because we all work together as a family to support each other, to achieve our visions and our purposes, and those might change, but we allow that. I think that's the beauty in it, and you guys hold me to account all the time for that, which is the most important piece. So we have yarned for ages. We were going to talk about referendum, post-referendum, and funding opportunities and philanthropic space and all this other stuff, but we might jump into that next week. Because I think there's so much to break down from that. We're also going to have special guests join us over the next few weeks as well. But I guess we wanted to create this podcast as an opportunity for people outside of our community to get to know us as human beings and as blackfellas, but also just as Strong Brother, Strong Sister, as an organisation, to know our story, to know what we do, but also to see the challenges that we face, the advocacy pieces that we do, and everything else that comes with being a First Nations youth organisation. I think there's more First Nations youth orgs being created there today, and I see us as a leader in the space to be able to share knowledge and so much more. So I guess the podcast is around sharing everything that we have to create better opportunities for our young ones, but also to bring other, the external people in to see what we do. So, Keeds, Bruss, thank you for grilling me and thank you for the questions. But as always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
We're going to get ready for this sailing program. For anyone that has listened, if anything, we did talk about some pretty pressing issues. So if anything has brought up anything, there are amazing supports out there. There's 13 Yarn, Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Headspace. There's also the work that we do. If anything's brought up anything, get in contact, talk to loved ones, talk to friends, and know that you're valued, safe and supported. Until next one, take care.
Thanks for watching this week's episode.
If you would like to see more of this type of content, like and subscribe.
If you want to support the work that we do at Strong Brother, Strong Sister,
Visit our website and make a donation today.
see ya!